And so we wanted to give him a few minutes to state his case as well. So Dave, welcome Dave Pagel.
Well, thank you for allowing me to speak. I know I'm not your star player here, but I don't want to feel that I'm ignoring you or that I'm not willing to talk to you. I am willing to talk. I was told I have 5 minutes, so I can't really go into a long defense of Common Core.
Gonna use a mic?
I can use that, I suppose. I like to walk around kind of when I talk, but this is fine, this is fine. I served on the school board in Berrien Springs for 14 years, and I was president all 14 years. I got to learn a few things about K-12 education. We were new school board members, almost the entire board, so we were kind of green. There had been a recall, they ran out of money in Berrien Springs. So one thing we did is we had each school board member, including myself, go to training. Our school board association offered that, so we could go to classes in school governance, in school curriculum, and everything that a school board could do, like collective bargaining, school finance, budgeting. And we got certified. We were one of the few schools in the whole state that actually all 7 board members were certified. And some of us, there's a 100 level of classes. Some of us took even more advanced classes. So I learned a few things about K-12. I'm not a world expert. I'm a farmer from Berrien Springs, and I run an apple packing business, and I'm a legislator, and I'm enjoying both. I'm a little overstretched. It's great to be home here in April. We have a few weeks off, and I've been out in my orchard trimming trees, and it's like heaven. It's quiet, it's peaceful, I'm in my orchard. I'm not a part of any international socialist conspiracy. I did in Lansing, I got put on this committee that Melanie referenced, that we heard all the testimony on Common Core. We heard Melanie, we heard others just as angry as she was, just as vocal against it. We heard experts. We also heard experts on the other side, quite a few. We met and we met and we met, and it was over 18 hours of testimony. As a committee, it was pretty stretching. We learned a lot. There are a few things that Melanie said that I definitely agree with, and there are quite a few things that I don't. We as a committee took a hard look at it. The statement that we could only ask one question is not true. I sat right next to Tom McMillan, and he just badgered some of the witnesses, but we got a good hearing. It could have been better in some ways. These things always can be. But we got to ask questions. We looked at the evidence. We're not a crazy bunch there. It was a pretty conservative group. In fact, I watched my fellow committee members, and I knew going into it, there was a couple of them that they were going to vote against Common Core no matter what. Tom McMillan, a couple others. There was 1 or 2 that I'm pretty sure were going to vote for Common Core, and there was a group in the middle. And that was kind of the way it was within our whole Republican caucus. Most were just undecided. After they heard the testimony, those who were negative stayed negative, but the others moved to the positive side. So there is a lot. If I had 45 minutes to talk to you, I could probably answer a lot of these concerns. I guess I'll just try to touch on a couple. I know I only got a couple minutes. When I was in school in the 60s and 70s, we had new math, and my parents said they didn't understand that. Math is taught different today. When I was in school, there were no calculators, there were no computers. We had to learn to carry the one and do that long division thing, and you slide the number over here and do the. Kids today are going to whip out their phone when they're on the job, and they got any function done right for them. They need to know the concept of how math applies to the real world to solve problems. They're always gonna be able to get the right answer, but they need to apply it to the real world. So when I go into a math classroom today, if I saw it taught exactly the same way I was taught, I would be really disappointed. I was a good math student. I can tell you to this day the quadratic formula, x equals negative a plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. I can't forget this crap. But I was a straight A math student. But today it is different somewhat. I talked to Brian Callie the other day at a meeting in Cass, and he's got some young kids in school right now. And I asked him, well, what's this Common Core math? How are you doing? He says, you know, when I help my kids with my homework, I really struggle with this stuff. But my son loves it, and he's really doing well, and he's getting all the right answers. I don't always understand how he's doing it, but it's okay. I talked to my sister this week. She's got a grandson, Mitchell, in early grades of math, doing the same thing. She says, you know, I have a hard time figuring out his homework, but he just whips right through these problems, and it's not a square sheet of this times this equals this 20 times over like we had. It's more of a story problem. It's an application. It is different. New math was different when I was in school. It's not all bad. These kids have to have a little different skills today. I agreed with Melanie when she described what Common Core is. If you take nothing else home, Common Core spells out what each student should learn at each grade level. It's not rocket science, it's standards. Standards started back in the 90s with No Child Left Behind and all this. There was a movement, and all states did. There was 50 sets of standards. Each state had their own set of standards. And that was kind of a crazy thing. Why did Michigan rank 40th? Well, our standards were pretty tough. So a lower percentage of our students were making the standard. A lower percent were proficient because we set the bar pretty high. Strangely enough, Mississippi, they were getting really high scores. They set the bar down here. 50 different sets of standards. Was there federal government involved? Was there money involved? Sure. Before Common Core, when they were these 50 state standards, we were rewarded. I was on the school board. You were rewarded if you made adequate yearly progress. You had an increasing number of percentage students getting proficient. I hated those federal laws. And there was a carrot and stick in federal money, and there is with Obamacare, with Obama and Common Core. They've got their federal programs running parallel to it. I don't like them. I haven't seen hardly anything good come out of the federal government for education. These standards were written by the states, and I think Melanie agrees. The movement from these 50 state standards to Common Core was basically a group of governors. Engler was one of them, Tommy Thompson, John Kasich, some good people. They looked at those international results that United States was down here amongst developed countries, and they said, why should we have 50 different standards? We're not doing a good job as a country. Let's work together. And they did look at which states were doing a better job, and they tried to set standards higher. They raised the bar, and they agreed voluntarily to join in. Some states have chosen not to. Some experts say they're wrong. Actually, I've gone to my different superintendents in the area, curriculum directors. I've talked to them. It wasn't as big a change for Michigan as some other states because our standards were already pretty high. They like the standards. It's not a magic bullet. I agree more than anything. Education takes place when that door closes and the teacher's in the room with the students. That's where we got to support education. Equip that teacher. Have students that their families have prepared them to learn. Don't have too many in the room. Give that teacher the right equipment to learn. That's where it takes place. I think we could expect more out of our universities that train teachers. My principal at Berrien Springs in the elementary, you know what his biggest complaint is? They hire new teachers fresh out of universities. The teachers don't know how to teach reading. They have to train the teachers in Berrien Springs who are college graduates. They have to teach them how to teach reading. we should expect more from our universities. Lastly, I'm over time, I'll just say about textbooks. We had state standards for many, many years, even before Common Core. We didn't use all the same texts in Michigan. Berrien didn't use the same texts as Niles or St. Joe. And we will not under Common Core. Under Common Core, all of a sudden, you've got 44 states right now saying, we want texts that help us teach to these standards. This is a huge force in the marketplace of free economics. All your textbook companies are going to be looking now, well, if we can develop texts that better teach to these standards, we're going to get the sales. So what's happening is, when I was on the board, we didn't like a lot of the textbooks. They were coming out of California or Texas because they had large populations. We had to adapt our teaching to their lousy textbooks. Now, it's the other way around. These textbook companies are saying, this is what the states want, let's try to have our books teach what their standards are, and I like it that way better. Plus, we're gonna get inundated with new books, new materials from 1,000 different sources. We're gonna have more choices than ever. I can't cover everything, I'm sure I went over my 5 minutes, I apologize. I wanted to talk to anybody anytime, and I'm not infallible on this, and I agree with some things and disagree with others. Thank you.
Now, we'll take some questions now, and just, questions, not statements, okay? Questions.
Sir, you raise your hand first.
Yes. You guys say you're public servants. We sat down with Al Pashoka. He told us he didn't know what Common Core was, correct? When you guys both voted for it.
What's the question?
My question is, well, first of all, Al told us he didn't know what it was. Now we know the cat's out of the bag, he knows what it was. My question is, well, you're a public servant. Can I get a show of hands, how many people are in support of Common Core? How many people are opposed? You teach my kids that they come from monkeys and that 2 + 2 = 5. My question to you,
That's an outrageous lie.
is it? Because I was really confused in 5th grade when my teacher, who was a Christian in my church, told me that I came from a monkey. So I started thinking, did God create me as an ape and then I evolved?
I'm a Christian also, sir.
Well,
Let's ask the questions, Zach.
the question is, my question for you is, how does 2 + 2 = 5, and you go against the Bible and say that there's separation between church and state?
I grew up with the Bible.
How are you a public
and
servant, but you act like a public
You
master?
want an answer?
Okay.
I grew up with the Bible. It shaped my life more than any other piece of literature. 2 + 2 = 4, always has, always will. Maybe there's a different way to teach it at times. 2 + 2 = 4.
We just said there's a different way to teach it.
Okay, now, more questions on Common Core.
My name is Jim. I want to know if any of you guys that voted for the Common Core, however it was implemented into the state that we're going to do now, did you guys consult one single parent on this issue or one single educator? Because I don't remember ever being asked about this.
I've talked with numerous educators. The ISD locally had me come in and with a lot of their staff and presented to me why they supported CORE. I talked to the Niles superintendent also. I talked to the Berrien Springs superintendent. Berrien Springs has a curriculum director named Jan Berrien, who's been there 40 years.
So no, you did not talk to parents.
One advantage of my 14 years on the school board was to have a relationship like that. I know Jan's heart, that she's all about what's best for kids, and it was her endorsement of Common Core that affected my leaning more than anyone else. But there were parents involved. I've talked to parents, I've talked to teachers.
I just want to add a couple things. First of all, I went through that Michigan Association of School Boards training as well, and in School Board Training 101, they taught us how to get around the Open Meetings Act. So in my opinion, they are just as bad in terms of their certification about how school board members should behave, because they don't teach you how to provide good oversight to schools. So that's a problem in the training that the school board members have. But I've heard several people say, the fellow that's running against Justin Amash has got a thing on YouTube about why he supports Common Core, and he said, he asked superintendents and they said it's a higher standard and it will improve accountability. The fact of the matter is, there is not a school board, a superintendent in the state of Michigan who's been waving his hand saying, I want to be held accountable. That's why they wanted the No Child Left Behind waiver. An accountable superintendent would be saying, I'm figuring out how 100% of my third graders will be able to read, and I don't need you passing a law to fail them, because that's not going to help. And so I am biased against superintendents. They came up through the system that think these progressive education models work, and they don't. And the proof is in that most of these superintendents, our state school board, our state superintendent, have been in their jobs since about 2000. And there is no improvement in student achievement in the 14 years they've been in charge. And they are not holding themselves accountable for that. So I respect, here's the problem. People say we have to trust the experts. But the educators that are in the job right now are not experts. Because if they were doctors, we wouldn't go to them. So the logic of I'm trusting the experts, I have a relationship with superintendents, is flawed. And I will tell you, in sitting through the testimony, the parents are the ones, and the grandparents are the ones, and some number of brave teachers who said this is a bad idea. So I'm sorry, but I don't think our legislators who voted for this are listening to the grassroots. And this is less a Republican and Democrat issue as it is an elite versus the grassroots.
It's a right
There are people, and John Engler's been in this way for a long time. He knows better than you do how to educate your children. And he's wrong. He doesn't. And so free choice and more parent engagement, that's what's going to work. And I feel bad because this is a complex issue. And it's hard for the legislators to get their arms around it. And how do you decide? But I will tell you, if I had a representative who said to me, I went to the experts, and that means I talked to educators, whose track record is as dismal as it is, I'm sorry, I don't like that decision-making process.
Thank you. Another question here.
First of all, instead of going to a higher way of teaching our children, most of the children today should be taught like all us old people that are sitting here in this room. When you go to a store today and you tell these young children, I want a half a dozen, they look at you in bewilderment. They don't have an iPod to pull out of their pocket and divide 12 by 2 and come up with 6. And they don't know how to do it in their feeble little mental pygmy brain. Thank you.
I don't think there was a question there, but thank you.
Questions. I'm a grandparent, a parent, a retired teacher, and a substitute teacher. I taught before Common Core. I'm subbing in Common Core. It is the most ridiculous system and waste of time. They have something called the Daily 5. You spend 15 minutes reading to a neighbor. Then you spend 15 minutes reading to yourself. Then you spend 15 minutes on the iPad. Then you spend 15 minutes practicing spelling. And then you have 15 minutes maybe with the teacher with individual reading education. First graders are spending 45 minutes on creative writing. You cannot find a textbook that is not Common Core. And it's 2.1.33a.4. That's the standard. What? Right. And I just finished in the second grade where it was 431, take away 127. Take this piece of paper and do each of these 4 problems 4 different ways, show your work, and explain how you do it. Second grader. They worked on it for an hour. Why don't you
You have a
just...
question?
So my question is,
Yes.
as a supervisor, how many hours have you spent in the classroom teaching Common Core whatevers at different levels? Because I have never, ever, ever seen a supervisor in the classroom.
That's probably a very good question. How many supervisors that like Common Core have done? I think it was a question here.
The question is, what good is Common Core?
I have a question
Yeah, I want to know how
for each of you. First, you had examples of questions that were politically charged and biased, and one could presume is for the purpose of indoctrination of political philosophy, and children are impressionable. Okay.
There you go.
You had examples of politically charged material where they're just using as an example something they grab to illustrate an academic principle, but there's an underlying political philosophy that's being pushed. Where those examples come from? Are those from the doctrine of the core itself, or is that just how people have taken the core material and used it as educators, maybe at an individual level? I'm just wondering, what is the source of that?
Well, some of each. So if you go back to like the one of the source people, David Coleman, and even John Engler, and read some of the writing that they started in the 80s and 90s about education reform. It's a big model. It says use the standards to drive the curriculum, to drive the assessment, to get the result you want. And it would work whatever way you put it together. But then you see that they started putting these things in there. I mean, somebody said to me, well, some of those politically charged things have been around for a while. It's not Common Core. Well, yes, they have been around for a while, but the problem is Common Core is what is making it permanent, making it everywhere, making it drive the assessment. So there's a lot in there, and one of the things that our team has debated about is there's a law that they're talking about, the Constituting America, where they're trying to get requirement to teach the Constitution in the schools. I'm quite worried that we passed this law. If the Constitution is taught by people who don't believe in it the way we believe in it, it's not going to do
The
any
Supreme
good.
Court just ruled its privileges.
But the problem, it really is, you develop this mindset in young people, and then when you send them to the schools of education, and I couldn't agree with Dave Pagel more on the schools of education are a major problem in this whole design, but they come out thinking this way, then they reinforce it, and so then the textbooks are written that way. So it's kind of a whole system of progressive thinking that's integrated, and it's coming from different places, but it's all coming together at the same time.
Okay, another question here.
National Teachers Associations also do it.
Okay,
Another question.
Yes.
another question.
I just have a question. I'd like you to explain to me how, with so much testing, continual testing, my second grader is going to learn how to write a paragraph because her teachers informed me there's no time to teach. And if she could just teach the way that she's taught the last 20 years, all the kids in her class would know how to conjugate and form a paragraph. But she can't teach that way anymore. So how is my daughter going to learn how to write well? So tell me, please.
She'll pull out her iPhone.
Oh, she will, and just do, because I'm a proponent of education. My father was on the school board, the school district I grew up with. So, if you've not been in the classroom, you can't really comment, and you haven't seen the homework. How do you know if it's beneficial to the children or not?
I think there is too much testing. If we could cut down on the time spent, I know when they do those meat tests, it's like they dedicate a whole week. Well, the kids are only in school 100 and some days a year, and you take all those days
On
For
top of
testing,
Common Core testing.
that's kind of silly. I think we need to cut down on the days of testing.
Okay, does that mean you're gonna stand behind getting rid of Smarter Balance?
The legislature specifically went out of their way to not endorse Smarter Balance testing or any particular testing. And we said we want to examine the different testing options. Right now, the State Board of Education has chosen Smarter Balanced as a pilot, but the state legislature has not endorsed. We specifically went out of our way to not endorse any testing method. And part of it was, it gets confusing when you throw testing in the mix with the standards and you start
There's no time for teaching.
to mix the two issues, and we wanted to concentrate on the issue of standards.
Okay, so if Mr. Pagel is true to his word, he would vote no on Smarter Balance because Smarter Balance will be given 3 times a year. So as egregious as perhaps the meat might be, that when you're doing interim assessments that this is driving, you're increasing the number of tests and the test time that the
Right.
students will be taking.
So there's less time for teaching.
Right.
So how are our kids gonna know how to write a paragraph and an essay when they're going to college or filling something out for their future job? Because that is still critical information. There's no time to teach.
Okay, thank you.
Well,
Another question
It's a
here?
very complicated.
I would agree that writing, I had a daughter who was, actually this is before Common Core, but she was valedictorian in Berrien Springs. And she's a great student, obviously 4 point. She went to Calvin College, and when she had to write her first paper, I had to go up there and really show her how to write a paper. We need to teach English language arts better. That's kind of outside of this discussion, but I do share concerns with how we're teaching.
Okay, thank you. We'll put another question here.
How many parents, grandparents in this room have helped their children when they were in school do homework?
3 hours a night.
How many think they'll be able to help their children with homework with Common Core?
Oh, it's not.
Okay, now the question, now that was the question. The statement is, I don't trust the government to have control of my children, because once you are not able to help your children, you have to rely solely on the school and on those computers that Bill Gates gives to everybody in the world. And then your child is in front of this computer, and you have no interaction with them at all. And they can indoctrinate, like the gentleman up front talked about, and your kids are gone forever. And they can have to take it in any direction they want.
Thank you. Another question here.
I don't know if I'd have to remind you, but I believe the Republican Party platform back in its older days was against the Department of Education on its face, just on principle, because it was increasing the power of the federal government over education, and traditionally Republicans have been more limited on that. And I heard you talking about the 50 experiments and how, some of them aren't as good, so it doesn't work. I'm curious, do you actually think that that's like the best answer? Like, some states are bad, some are better, or is it something that literally, do you have your arm twisted for this? Or do you really think this is the best answer?
I'm sorry, could you specify that question a little bit better?
Do you think Common Core is the best
Oh.
answer? Basically, right?
Yeah, are you settling, or is this really what you best?
As far as the federal Department of Education, I haven't seen anything good come from there. The standards have typically, historically, always come at the state level. It's beyond a local school board's expertise or role and prerogative to set grade level standards. Local school boards can't do that. Traditionally, historically, it's been done by states. Common Core was just these states talking to each other and saying, maybe we should agree together and share standards and look at who's doing the best job. They're not perfect yet, but I think they're a step up from where we were with the 50 state standards.
Okay, I have a question. I wondered, Melanie and then Dave, what some of the unintended consequences are of this. And I saw one the other night. I happened to tour Benton Harbor Street Ministries in their GED testing. They can't do it anymore because of Common Core. So I wondered if you have heard that.
Yes, there's a serious problem with the career technical track for students in Common Core. But there's also a serious problem with kids who want to go into science, technology, engineering, and math, STEM related, because the bar is so low. The definition of Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2 are lower than what we've always had in the state of Michigan as our expectation for those levels. So you've got the high achieving kids who will have problems. You have the kids who want to go more career track that will have problems. We're just starting to understand the issues with the special ed children. But there's one other one I wanted to mention. Hillsdale College has a classical academy model for a public charter school. Terrence Moore opened one out west, and it was highly successful, great student achievement in there. We have tried to open, I think there have been 5 or 6 applications through the chartering process. They are all being declined because it is classical model, which is not Common Core. And so the chartering organizations are saying, well, it's not Common Core, the state standard is Common Core, so you can't use a classical model. This is where you teach Latin in elementary school, you teach the traditional literature, you teach the traditional math. I don't think the legislature intended for that to happen, and I think once they start to realize that we're not going to be allowed to have classical academies in the state of Michigan, that they're going to be sorry about that.
Well, the instructor the other night, they've had yet anybody successfully pass the GED on the Common Core. It's all been revised now to Common Core. She also made a statement, she does not know it now. She's got to learn herself before she does any tutoring for the GED. But she made a comment that somebody that one who teaches the GED in the jail, he took the test and failed it. So he or he is instructing people into their GED, passing their GED, and he can't take the test.
Did he used to be able to pass?
Yes, yes, successfully.
So the GED is based on the...
Based on Common Core as of January 1st.
On one hand, we're hearing that the standards are just too low, they're not good enough, and on the other hand, they're too tough for some students. I don't know which argument you want to make.
Go back to the
As far as these STEM students or more advanced students, that's what the word core means. Common Core standards it's the core, the heart of knowledge that a student should learn at each grade level. It's a floor. So you don't have physics in Common Core, you don't have calculus. My son is an engineer, he took a lot of physics and a lot of calculus in high school. That won't change at all. That's not part of the core.
Common Core, right?
The core knowledge, no, that's with Common Core. The Common Core is for every student. It's kind of a minimum that every student who's going to a four-year school or going to a trade school or going straight into work, they should have this core knowledge of mathematics. So calculus, that's for the more advanced students, or this physics. That doesn't have anything to do with Common Core.
All right, I think we're running out of time.
Okay, let me just real quickly clarify the point. I know this is complicated. The standards are too high, developmentally inappropriate K-3. They're just irrational in middle school, and they are too low in the high school. So for people who are having trouble sorting out why that argument makes sense, I just wanted to help clarify.
Okay, I'll ask the last question.
All right.
This is making my head hurt.
Mention the states?
Now you know how our
It's clear-
children feel in school.
It's clear to me that we need to scrap Common Core completely
Yes.
and start over. And so my question is,
Teacher involvement.
teacher and parent involvement.
Teacher.
If we started over, and we think of the principles of how America got started, I think what we would do is say, okay, we're ranked 40th in the world. Let's go look at the top 10 and figure out the standards and the methodologies that those countries or states, I guess it's states that are out there, what they use. And why don't we follow those experiments and say, let's go with a successful experiment and use the Singapore map. Or, instead of having an unelected, progressive group of people get together and create standards out of whole cloth that have never been tested. And to me, it's just wholly irrational. So that's my question.
I'll finish up first.
We have one more
I
question.
disagree with most of that, but really Common Core was states looking at each other. These are our governors, these are our state school officers.
These are your people.
Will you let me
No, you don't
speak?
listen. You're a public servant, not a public master.
I am a public servant. It's 20 years now that I've been serving the public, mostly at the more local level, school board. I did 4 years of county commissioner. I do it because I think it's the right thing to do to give back to your community. I don't like politics, and it's wearing pretty thin on me at this level. But there were 50 experiments going on, and part of the impetus behind CORE was to look at which states were doing better and raise our standards. Maybe we didn't do it the best. And if your head is hurting, I'd say maybe it's a good thing to have a lively debate. I knew coming in here I wasn't going to win any converts, but I thought maybe you'd understand a little of where I'm coming from. I don't have a vote in this room. That's all right. Support Jim. He thinks Common Core is an international socialist conspiracy. We haven't heard that one yet. It's on his website. But thank you. You didn't give me 5 minutes as a candidate. But thank you for at least listening and not hitting me. I've had some talks with Melanie at great length, and we've always respected each other personally and been collegial. It gets lively. I thank her. I thank you, Sherry, for allowing me to come. I apologize. You don't agree with me. That's all right. I'm a big boy. I can stand it. Thanks for listening as politely as you have. And we'll all move on. If Jim wins in August, I'm going to vote for him in November because we got to keep Republicans in Lansing. We've got a lot of good things going in this state. Let's keep it going. Thank you very much for your time.
Alrighty then. Well, I do,
Sherry, can I just do one thing? I never entered into here. Those two books you have. I just, pictures
oh wait,
worth,
they're on the,
a picture's worth 1,000 words.
okay.
Okay, to me it's really simple. This is your second grade reader for Common Core. This is your second grade reader at a classical school. Let me get it.
What page?
Yeah, I just wanted to grab a couple pages. What do you think's a little more challenging? I didn't have to read the words to you. I mean, I could flip the pages, and they're like, 10, 20 words to these, to one. I mean, you read this book, and they'll be up here and look at it. One's silly. The other one is, it has some meat to it. It's really, it really is quite simple.
One is literature and the other is crime.
Yeah. So, like I said, I'm sorry, I didn't mean
No, you're fine, you're fine. I don't know what it's like to be a state legislator, and I'm never gonna find out, to tell you the truth. I'm not running. Thank God there are people that will run. There are things that are fundamentally wrong in our country.
This is one of them.
Our education system is in the toilet, and it was in the toilet long before Common Core ever came along. Okay? It needed to be changed, but we don't need Bill Gates and the likes of him telling us how to educate our children. Period. Our healthcare system is broken.
Amen.
Broken. But we do not need Obamacare, and we sure as heck don't need Medicaid expansion here in Michigan. There's a whole bunch of people in this room that believe that way. There's a whole bunch of people in this room that have a choice to vote in the August 5th election. And you choose which way you want this state to go, according to the way you vote. If you want to keep going status quo, you keep voting the people in that are in there now. If you want some real change and you want things to go backwards to the founding principles, the God-given founding principles that our country was based on, this is the election to do it in. Okay, got that cleared up. Can I get an amen? Okay, we are really running late tonight. I do want to give our candidates a few minutes each to speak, okay? And so when I say a few minutes, please, don't make me hurt you. So I want to give each of the candidates a few minutes to speak, their information. Am I losing people? Settle down, folks. We got about 10 more minutes and then we're out of here. And I also want to add, George Scarlettis is also running for U.S. Senate. And he is here this evening. He's just declared his candidacy not too long ago, and needs petition signatures as well. So he is running to take Carl Levin's spot in the U.S. Senate. So we're going to give George a couple of seconds to talk too. So Jim Walker, come on down. You've got 2 minutes.
I've been putting my thoughts together while everybody was up here talking. I didn't want to ask a question in the interim. I want everybody else to have an opportunity because I knew I would. It's really simple. And Dave came, he told us that our state standards are really high, and that's good. And I agree that our state standards were high with Common Core. And I don't want to make this a political opportunity to pick a Dave because he's out here to defend himself now. But to try to increase those standards, as Common Core says they did, doesn't make sense when we already weren't making the Michigan standard. So herein lies the problem. And Melanie put it perfectly. It comes from the home and it comes from the teacher participation. That's where the problem is. It wasn't the standard and it never has been. And adding this social agenda of progressivism doesn't make sense either. And throwing the carrot out there of all this money and then beating you with a stick if you didn't meet the standards that you already knew you couldn't make because you already weren't there doesn't make any sense. So if you have that many problems with a new program that has absolutely no opportunity to win, vote no. It's that simple. Read it. You disagree with it. You don't want the federal involvement in your local stuff. Just vote no. And that's the way I would do it. Just vote no. Does it make sense? Just vote no.
I'm just going to mention one thing I meant to mention earlier. We have the part-time petitions at the back, and we need to get this on the ballot. So we need the 360,000 signatures. Part-time legislator, what did I say? Part-time legislator. So we need to get those petitions signed and get them in so we have enough. I'm sure they want a whole lot more than 360,000, so we're sure that this gets on the ballot. Just a couple facts. I meant to mention this last month and I forgot. This is when you're out getting petition signatures, this is a perfect reason to give people. The Senate in Michigan actually took up time last legislative session to pass Talk Like a Pirate Day. It was introduced by a Republican and he appeared on the Senate floor with a patch over his eye going "arr" the whole time. So they actually spent time doing this. So that's a perfect reason right there. They have time to do that. They don't need to be there. It's too much time. One other thing, back to the slideshow from the powwow, just something I heard that weekend, almost every rep that voted for Medicaid expansion is getting primaried. So that is a really good thing. And we should all be proud that we are part of this movement. So, that's it.
Jim.
Make it snappy.
Hey, Sam.
Well, I got to talk about
That's it. You better talk fast.
How you guys doing? Great that everybody's here tonight. Really kind of a little spicy little meeting. Spicy, right? Quick campaign update. We've been at our last pusher for the rest of the signatures. We've got enough to file, but not enough to withstand challenges. So if you have not signed to get my name on the ballot, the other JB, Janet Lazen's back here. She's got my petitions, and when the meeting's over, we can do that. Also, just want to say one other thing. We're having an event on April 17th. It's going to be in Kalamazoo at the Old Dog Tavern. We're having a Freedom Symposium there, and I challenge you guys to come. It's going to be like a trip to a place that probably you don't spend much time at. It's going to be a lot of different people, Democrats, Republicans.